Right, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I'm a senior lecturer in anaesthesia and critical care. I'm certainly not going to, I think it's wrong to say best practice. I'm going to talk about my practice, and I'm not sure that's not necessarily best practice, but it's certainly different to some other people's. I'm also going to try and show you relatively few slides. I can't imagine there'd be anything to write down. I can't imagine why it was that. And also show you various other bits and pieces. And I do apologise a bit towards the end, because it does get very slightly geeky towards the end, but there's a bit of reason behind all that. I thought I'd just sort of set the scene a little bit, really. I mean, I'm a clinical academic. I work full-time in critical care. But I have quite a lot of other academic interests, both research and teaching. And my sort of long-running theme, really, both in research and also the sort of safety practice, has been medical devices. And particularly trying to make people not injure themselves or patients with medical devices. And it was about 2003-04, I think, having sat on the Committee on Safety Devices, I was invited to go along to it's called the MHRA, which is a part of it's an executive agency of the Department of Health, Medicines and Healthcare Product Regulatory Agency, which deals with medical device safety, and asked to have a bit of a chat about trying to produce some educational packages. They had quite an interesting history. They'd had a video that they'd made originally onto tape in about 1995, which ran for about 20 minutes and was clearly getting quite dated. The interesting thing about that video is that 20-minute video cost about 250k to have made, so it was quite an extraordinarily expensive project at that time. And then more recently, around about when I arrived, they were in discussion with a professional e-learning company that produced e-learning material from up north, which was all right, and they'd had a sort of history with the NHS producing e-learning material, and we did a certain amount of work with them. I think one of the things we discovered is that we did most of the work, and they did relatively little in terms of actually finding and producing it. And that produced a 20-minute CD with some vaguely interactive bits. It had mainly images, it had no video on it, it had no animation, and it had a few quizzes that you could do. And that 20-minute e-learning package cost us £40,000. So things had come down, but certainly at that time, and not that differently now, if you go out to commercial companies, fully commercial companies and have everything sourced, then around about sort of £2,000 a minute for e-learning isn't unusual. I think our approach to that was, this is unbelievably expensive, bearing in mind we've done most of the work. And so I got interested in it, I think as far as I remember, typed e-learning software into Google and came up with various products, most of which you will be familiar with. And I started it with a very early version of Articulate, and I have to say I've remained with it. I have used most of the others that are out there, but I've remained with Articulate. I've also remained using it as it was originally intended, although it has changed a lot, which uses PowerPoint as its object organiser, if you like. It removes itself from PowerPoint very quickly as soon as you publish. The attraction of that, because I guess like many of you, I've been using PowerPoint for many, many years, and therefore was quite used to the way it handled images and the way it handled objects and what it looked like. And in fact, Articulate handles most of the animations within PowerPoint. It handles all the very simple ones very straightforwardly. But it will handle more complex animations. I'll show you one that it won't handle towards the end, which is a shame, because it won't handle repeated motion paths. It will handle a single motion path, but it won't handle recurrent ones, so you can't make things repeat in the animation, which is a shame. And so we bought out a free copy of that, so the first thing we produced all had powered by Articulate scrawled all the way across it. Able actually to produce reasonable quality looking material almost from the word go, and in fact that's now being nationally produced. There are about 8 or 9 modules with about 11,000 people looking at them across the country. And one of the things we did right from the word go, which is mainly what I want to talk to you about today, was to narrate them. And we decided from quite an early point that actually, I suppose partly because we've got a big gob and like talking, but also was the idea that really there was quite a bit of difference. If you wanted to try and mimic a lecture, you could obviously capture a lecture as you're doing today, but if you wanted to mimic that in an e-learning format, then it was quite difficult to do that if you had no audible component to it. And that actually was quite different in those days. You may well have come across e-learning for health. E-learning for health has spent about £11 million producing some extremely high quality educational material, started in radiology, then anaesthesia, and now has branched out. But with relatively few exceptions, almost all of that is mute. And that was because the builder that they used at the time struggled to get the sound and the video in synchronization, and they felt it was just too much hassle to do that. And my own view, and I'll give you some illustrations of that, my own view is that was a shame, and they are now looking at doing that. So that was how I got into the whole business, really. And then the next project that came along was we bid to write the postgraduate diploma for the physician assistants in anaesthesia, called anaesthesia practitioner at that time. That was an open competition with about 8 or 9 other HEIs. And I think we won the bid on a number of things. Mainly was that we were prepared to do it as an entirely distance learning course. And the academic content of that would be entirely delivered on the web. So there would be no face-to-face lectures. There would be locally held tutorials with consultant anaesthetists and locally held practicals, etc. And that's now been running for 7 years and has had about 120 people go through that nationally and has received a lot of, I think, very positive comments about it. But because we were going to do that entirely in a distributed fashion, we felt that some form of web-based approach was probably the only way to go.
What you thought of that session you just attended?
Yeah, it was great. I think it was good to get an academic to lead the lead the workshop. It was basically given his experience on how to build e-learning tools. I think it was more about the e-learning tools rather than the lecture recording.
Yeah.
So it's overall, I think it was pretty good. It was very useful to get an insight.
How to use articulate. What do I then need to do?
Well, that's the point I was trying to make in the very last comment. Is that I think the way I think we would want to enable that. Can I just make just slightly separated? I see this as a slightly different business to recording a lecture. The reason I say that, I think the technique, the way in which you use things for these what we call e-lectures or e-learning, I think is subtly different to recording a lecture. You'll notice that on none of them have I had a talking head. Now we've played with that, and they're quite nice. It has a very high video overhead if you use that. It uses an awful lot of bandwidth just to have a picture of my rather ugly face chatting away.
So let me rephrase it. I need to have some experts chatting about aspects of my work, so I can just click a button when I'm.
Well, I think if you want to do, if you want to do a podcast, if you want just to do audio only, I think the answer is what we should have is a set of little voice recorders we can lend you, and then you just put it on and send it back to us. That would be very straightforward.
But when you say send it back to you, you keep saying send it back to you so you can attach the slide and the sound.
No, that was sorry. No.
I haven't worked out if that's a big thing.
It is a big thing. Let's just split that up a little bit. If
it's
you
not
want,
something that I'd be able to learn to do.
I think the answer is of course you could learn to do it. It's just a question of the time as you've got to do it. We moved slightly away. I said if you just wanted sound only, that's very straightforward because a podcast is just one file. That would be very straightforward. If you want to do this, you want to write some slides and talk to them. I think probably David's suggestion, which is that we would lend, well, I don't know what we're going to do, we haven't discussed it yet, but one of the ways to do would be for you to borrow a notebook with articulate loaded on it and a very simple set of instructions. Because you can load your PowerPoint slide on from wherever, your lecture on from wherever you've got it. And then you have to have articulate on the machine. It pops up within PowerPoint. And you click on articulate, click record narration, and it comes up with a set of controls. I think you'd need a small set of slides to show you how to do that. You'd record that on that machine, and then I think then it's quite a straightforward job then back here for us to publish that.
I think there are opportunities for training as well, I believe. Learning Spaces, we're using Panopto at the moment. Learning Spaces have got licenses and stuff, and they'll give you a training course from down the road.
I was going to say, I use Panopto, and it's, you literally just click record, your PowerPoint comes up, you talk over it.
Well, that's what you do here. That's what you do at Articulate.
But you don't, you then just get sent an email with a link to view it, and you've got the link and you can turn it into a podcast and all that. So there's no you can do it.
There isn't, in all fairness, in Articulate, there's no post-processing, you just press publish. It's just the fact that if you want, it depends a little bit whether, I just think it's, I think if you're happy to do that, that's fine. It's just that if you may end up with some really quite sizable, if you're going to start using plenty of images and plenty of animations, so you end up with enormous files. If all you've got is text on it, that's fine. I mean, the presentation I've shown you is already 120 meg. And if you want to send it off to someone else so that they can actually adjust the way it's done, then you need to, you start getting very big files.
Oh, I enjoyed that, I must say. It was an interesting session. I think I prattled on a bit too long about different types of software, and I really wanted to make the point about the sound recording. And I think within reason, most people I thought it was interesting. I think a number of people, they don't cough while I'm trying to talk. I think a number of people thought that probably we were getting a bit carried away with the hardware. But what I wanted to try and do is give this point that there's actually quite a big step between a relatively affordable, and if you really want to go up to the top end and get really good voice, you need to spend quite a bit of money, but it's perfectly acceptable in between the two. But that probably just recording straight into your laptop doesn't really work. But it's good fun. Thanks very much.